On today's Locked On Bucks, we get you set for the Bucks matchup with the Lakers tonight. And take a look at the latest story from Chris Haynes about this Bucks offense in a big meeting between Giannis, Damian Lillard, and Doc Rivers. We get into that conversation next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for continuing to check out the Locked On Bucks newsletter. If you have not done so yet, you can still sign up for free. Just head over to lockedondaily.com to get your day started with the all-new free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to score $20 off your first purchase. Camille, we spent a decent amount of time kind of down on yesterday's show. I'm sure it came across as, man, these guys sound like they're out on the team and pretty negative here. And we talked through some of the lineups, suggestions of, hey, does everything need to be examined now? Do you need to look at a different starting five and so on? And hours after we did that show comes the Haynes brief from Chris Haynes that late last night, Doc Rivers set up a meeting between he, Giannis, and Damian Lillard to talk through the offense, which in itself was interesting, but even more interesting, some of the post-game quotes that started to come out that people were picking out from both Giannis and Dame, speaking to which I would assume kind of led to this meeting. What would appear to be differing views on how to run this offense.
Could quite be. I mean, when you hear Dame after the game, he's mentioning things like how the Bucks need to have plans in place and be more intentional with their execution. And then you hear Giannis's post game, and he's mentioning, got to play free, got to get downhill. So I could see how people can see those.
Play random, but that was the only thing missing.
That was the only thing missing. It's been engraved into who he is, the play random DNA. But just hearing the two differences, I can see how people are like, well, maybe they're just not seeing how the offense should be executed in the same way. And hearing that they had this meeting made a lot of sense to me, because we mentioned on yesterday's show that Doc Rivers seemed very visibly frustrated throughout his post-game presser. When he was asked about what they need to fix or what they are going to fix, he didn't really offer many details. He just kind of said, like, it's gonna be addressed. It's a lot of things going on. It's gonna be addressed, and I'm gonna handle it. We'll fix it. And hearing that they had this meeting, to me, came off as that first step in him trying to find what that fix is going to be for this Milwaukee Bucks offense, because it's been just really, really rough watching this offense operate, especially seeing how they started off after the All-Star break. They had quite a few, clutch game situations, but they were able to come out with dubs. And now we're seeing situations where, they don't score 100 points against the Warriors here. We've been seeing them struggle against the Thunder. We've just seen the offense throughout the season not execute as high of a level as we would assume. And Frank has been saying, they're just not as great as some of their parts. Like, a lot of great individual performances going on right here. But when you put it all together, something just seems like it's a little off still with this offense.
Yeah. And I mean, I suppose the good piece of this, the good news, is that there was this proactive approach from Doc Rivers to say, guys, I said, and as you mentioned, you could see he was wearing it on his sleeve last night, the frustration, not just with that Lakers game. I think it was just everything compounding into one for Doc of, okay, that's enough of this. Let's get this sorted out here. In that sense, yeah, you're glad, like, let's get this out of the way now. Let's make sure we can salvage this 5-game road trip, because as we talked about, Camille, you cannot go 1-4 in this road trip. And I think you could make a strong case. You can't go 2-3. You got to, especially with some of these teams where they are. We'll get to the injury report for the Lakers matchup, or what we presume to be the injury report for that game. It's not quite as daunting on paper as it initially looks. So you have to take advantage of this. And again, it's the offense that we're talking through. I mean, we heard earlier in the season about the defense, and that's going to take some time, and we're running a much different defense, and it's more complex. And after those first 10 games, it started to take off. And you're like, okay, this defense is much better. It has consistently been good. Sure, we can pick through even that game against the Warriors. There were moments where, as we talked through some of that confusion that you would see on switches, or what are we supposed to do here? That still exists every once in a while, but it is nowhere near where it was a season ago. It's the offense that continues to leave you confounded. And you mentioned some of the things that Frank will point out from time to time. I go back to one of Frank's tweets during that game against the Warriors, where he called attention to, and you already know where this is headed with your laughter, to Doc Rivers' quote from earlier in the season.
Yep.
Saying we haven't installed the offense because Chris Middleton isn't there yet. And Frank's, well, he's still not here, so I guess we're still waiting to install this.
When Frank said that, I was like, I can't argue it, because they don't look like they know what they're doing. And the concerning part is that the season is getting short now. Like, we're getting close to the playoffs, and we're still having some of the same conversations about how this offense doesn't look like it's quite clicking on all cylinders. And this particular road trip that they're on, we've talked about the importance of it, how it's a litmus test to see how this team is doing, so on and so forth. And when the Bucks came out of this All-Star break 7-1, I mentioned, like, hey, this is really nice that they keep stacking these wins. I want to see the consistency pick up, because this Bucks team this season, we've seen them go on great stretches of basketball, like on All-Star break. We just saw one of those good stretches, but then they follow it up, and you're just like, the losses just kind of stack and stack and stack. So the Bucks went 7-1 on All-Star break this year. They're 2-5 over their last 7 games now. There's 14 remaining games. We know Bobby's missing the next 10. So, like, you have 14 more games to try to clean this up. And when you look at last year's Bucks team, they came out of the All-Star break 6-0, finished that season 8-12, and they had 2 different 1-3 road trips during that 8-12 finish to the season. And over their last 11 games last year, they went 3-8. Like, we know Giannis missed those last 3 games, but you saw them kind of peter out before they headed into the playoffs. And for as much confusion that we've been seeing with this Bucks offense, my hope in this team relies on Dame and Giannis getting it right. If the two of them can execute at a very high level, the two of them keep that window open for the Bucks to try to make some noise come playoff time. So going back to the report, seeing that Doc pull them to the side to have that conversation is really important, because as much as we're going to talk about other pieces in the lineup as the show goes on with AJ Green, Taurean Prince, Kyle Kuzma, so on and so forth, it's all going to lay at the feet of Giannis and Dame if this doesn't get done right. So they got to take responsibility. They got to take the reins of this ship and go forward with it. So it's going to be on them to help get everybody else involved and organized throughout this offense.
Yeah, and you mentioned that 3-8 record last year to close out the season. It's easy to point to that and say, well, there was no Giannis, so that's the reason why. And was that a big reason why? Sure, but those games included losses to the Wizards, who were not good last year, Camille. To the Memphis Grizzlies.
The Grizzlies, who were super injured.
who have your number, but that was the season from hell in terms of injuries. The Knicks came back to get you. The Thunder, after you had arguably your best win and most impressive win of the season a couple of weeks prior to that, the Thunder just ran you off the courts in Oklahoma City. And then, of course, the final game in Orlando, where I think it started to kind of sink in with everyone of, they might be in trouble here, when you saw what the Orlando Magic did to them. So that's what you absolutely have to avoid here. Is this thing going off the rails for Doc Rivers to grab the steering wheel now and say, guys, we got to figure out what we're doing here offensively. It is an important first step, but now we got to start to see that execution on that end of the floor, especially with some teams coming up here that are going to give you opportunities to score. I'm looking at you, Sacramento Kings and Phoenix Suns, and potentially the Lakers too, depending on that injury report as they're playing as we record this tonight, Wednesday night, against the Denver Nuggets. So we'll take a look at what to expect for the injury report, and a little bit more of that conversation that we had on yesterday's show too, about some of these lineup questions that the Bucks still need to answer. And Is that going to be an offset of these conversations that Doc Rivers had with Giannis and Damian Lillard? We'll get into that conversation coming up next. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%. Plus, you also get 4% APY on your cash and non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rate subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Over the 8-time national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. It's time to talk to you now about our friends over at Game Time. The sports schedule is starting to heat up. There's no better time than to get out to a live event. Maybe you want to watch basketball live. The energy of the crowd, the sound of sneakers on the hardwood, maybe even a celebrity sighting courtside. If you want to catch a game in person, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever. Game Time's new feature, Game Time Picks, filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time scrolling through thousands of tickets. Check out the Game Time app, and there are always amazing deals on huge matchups coming up. Big ones for the Bucks once this 5-game West Coast road trip ends. They even have highlights of super deals giving you the best bang for your buck. And best of all, seat views before you buy. No surprise fee and a lowest price guarantee you can book with total confidence. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. We talk about celebrity sightings at basketball games, Camille. I don't know about you. Our boy Frank was in town over the weekend. I didn't get a call. I know he was with family, but here's the deal. I saw Frank at the game, I believe Saturday night against the Pacers. And he was with our guy and another fan of the show, Jimmy FK, and a few others. I stood up and tried to make eye contact with him. I couldn't say anything on the air. Looked right at him. And Frank just walked right past me.
Ooh, Frank said, I'm too big time for Justin. I got to keep it moving. He had great seats too. Like he was almost courtside where he was sitting at. So listen, Frank's big time.
Big time. So the lineups we talked through. I don't know about you. When we discussed this yesterday, and it's not just yesterday that we brought this up, this has been ongoing of what do they got to do with the starting five? When we left that conversation yesterday, I changed my mind 4 or 5 times on maybe it should be this. No, maybe it should be this. Maybe here. So much so to the point of, I think the biggest problem is there's no real great data points for any of it to suggest this is clearly the way. That I do think the starting lineup probably needs to be adjusted. You could talk me into basically anything because there's just not a great by the numbers 5-man grouping that we've come across, at least not with a significant sample size yet.
And that's a difference from last year's team because we could continuously point to like, hey, when this starting 5 is healthy, they are dominant. Like they are really killing.
Best in the league, best 5-man grouping. Yeah.
Wasn't like a 16, like a plus 16 net rating for the starting 5 group last year. So like it was something you could point to like, hey, if they can get there healthy, we like their shot because we've seen throughout the season, that they've been able to execute at a very high level. And this year, as you mentioned, there just hasn't been that one thing you can point to of like, hey, this grouping works. And what that tells me, I've seen some people alluding to the fact that they feel like Doc Rivers isn't flexible when it comes to his starting lineup and that he's just going to kind of keep going at it the same way. And I'm like, earlier this season, we saw him put Andre Jackson Jr. in the starting lineup because it wasn't working before. So I don't think that there's a hesitancy from Doc to make the change. I think it's just, is there a change he can make that he's like, I feel like this is going to be the one that really can unlock what we have going on? Maybe after the conversation that he had with Damian Giannis and they talked about with this offense, how they vision it going, maybe we do see a change that comes from it. Because as I've mentioned, the way that teams are playing Damian Lillard, trying to get him off the ball with the pressure, he mentioned himself that having another person on the court that can help handle the ball so he can play off ball a bit more is helpful to him and his game. He mentioned how that could be a weapon come playoff time for this team, but they just need to kind of figure out what's going to work for them. And on top of that, too, the players that they are using, make sure they're utilizing them in a way that makes a lot of sense. Like we discussed Kyle Kuzma and how teams are starting to defend him. Get him into more of the actions then. If the teams have adjusted to how you are with Kyle Kuzma, now you need to make that next adjustment on how you punish teams for making that choice to put their bigs on Kyle Kuzma and have them sag off. So outside of the lineup itself, I think the usage of players should be reevaluated, and they got to try to figure that out in the last 14 games here before they get to the playoffs.
You know what's fascinating is, so as you mentioned, there's no real clear cut, not just the lineup data, like a lot of things. And I think we touched on this a little bit yesterday of along the way, there were data points that you could say, well, I don't know that this means the Bucks are going to reach the conference finals or NBA finals even, but I at least have these things I can point to say, well, this suggests there's a chance. Whether it be where they were in terms of net rating against the 10 best teams in the league, their record against some of those teams, their record in the clutch, that five-man grouping as well. There are all these things that you could point to, or numerous things. This year, there's basically none of that, right? Like we've beaten to death the 0-9 record against the top three teams in the Eastern Conference. You can extend that even further now and say, well, they're 0-2 against the Thunder. They're 1-0 so far against the Denver Nuggets and against the Minnesota Timberwolves, but split with the Clippers, the Phoenix Suns. You got 2 games left against. Just up and down the list, the Memphis Grizzlies swept by that team. That you're starting to look across in the Western Conference too and say, man, there's some of those Western Conference teams are getting them too. Split with the Houston Rockets. So that's the struggle here, is looking at that and the fact that all these groupings that you look at for lineup. So I filter this to just 500 or more possessions together to try to see consistently a decent size of volume here. What are we seeing? And I could probably take it down to 400 or so, but sticking with lineups that have played together at least 500 possessions. The Bucks' best grouping is Brook Lopez, Giannis, Damian Lillard, Taurean Prince. And would you guess who the 5th player is?
Is it AJ Green?
It is not AJ Green. The first initial is correct.
It's not AJ. Andre Jackson Jr.?
It is Andre Jackson Jr. Now, that's the Bucks' best with that volume. It's still a negative 2.2 net rating with that. So that's where they sit. And that is in terms of, 500 lineups or more. I mean, that's around 15th or 16th best in the league. The best is the Boston Celtics, and it's not their traditional starting 5. It's Al Horford out there in place of Kristaps Porzingis. When they have that, Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Al Horford, they're a near 19 net rating. Their preferred starting 5 with Kristaps Porzingis there, right around where the Bucks are, just above the Bucks, a negative 1.4 net rating, and offense nearly identical, defense nearly identical to the Bucks. So that to me is the biggest head scratcher here, is if your best is worse than average, slightly worse than average, that's where it's, what do we got going on here?
Yeah, and that's what has to be figured out. And again, I'm glad that Doc and Dame and Giannis are having that conversation and really clearing the air, because it needs to be figured out. Like the individual, something like Giannis is having a great season in MVP conversation as that third guy in most conversations here, which I understand with how SGA and Jokic have been playing so far this season. You have Dame, who's had a really good season. Like he's averaging 7 assists a game. He's like 25 points. Like he's been putting up the numbers, but like the collective hasn't been as strong. Now, when you ask me the question, the reason I said AJ Green is because a lot of the lineup data tends to be like, oh, well, when he's on the court, it looks good when he's on the court. So I assumed it was him, but maybe we can go into this in the next segment here. Do you have any concerns with AJ Green's play over the last few weeks? Like we've talked about the shooting numbers and how they're not drastically different from what you would see from him. And I think a lot of people are like, because the wide open ones that are being missed, and that's what sticks in their mind. But we've had the conversations throughout the season about just the uptick in foul calls against him, the defense. So like, I'm really curious to know where you stand with AJ Green and his minutes right now with the Bucks and how that's going.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I don't know if it is like a confidence issue or AJ is in his own head, but I think we're starting to see some of those things starting to creep up here. I did, by the way, rerun those with 400, a minimum of 400 possessions versus 500. And there's some interesting results that are popping up. So I do want to touch on the AJ Green aspect here and some of the numbers that we've seen in his pre versus post splits. And the update to 400 possessions run together or played together for all teams in the NBA. Where do the Bucks fall there? We'll get into that conversation coming up after the break. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Finding the right talent is perfect with Upwork. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results. You can post a job for free, and it's always simple. And within a day, multiple qualified candidates are there to choose from. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork finds affordable, top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That is Upwork.com. Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, Camille, before we get to the AJ Green discussion, the update with 400 possessions as the minimum here.
Please tell me it's more positive than the 500.
So I'm trying to do the math here and count as I'm talking. We got great radio for those listening and watching. 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, so the Bucks' best grouping is 10th with 400 possessions as the minimum. Care to guess what that grouping is?
I'm going to assume that Giannis and Dame are still a part of it. I would assume Brooke is still a part of it there. So with those three there, are we doing like Taurean Prince, Gary Trent Jr.?
1 for 2 there.
Which one did I get right? Is this like that game with the bottles where you don't know underneath it and you won't tell me until
Taurean Prince is correct.
Okay, so not Gary Trent Jr. with them. 400 possessions. Is this one AJ Green?
No.
Wow.
This is the new starting lineup with Kyle
with
Kuzma.
Kuz. Okay.
Bucks are a plus 6.7 net rating. And this is cleaning the glass numbers, taking out garbage time, not NBA.com. 10th best in the league at a minimum of 400 possessions. But here's where it gets complicated and or challenging. The team directly in front of the Bucks. I know this is hey, take a guess 1 out of 29, but have a guess who that team would be. I'll tell you they're an Eastern Conference team.
Right ahead of it. Is it a Pacers lineup?
Ooh, you're close. It is the Detroit Pistons with Cade Cunningham, Asura Thompson, Tim Hardaway Jr., Jalen Duren in there, and Tobias Harris. That 5-man grouping is 9th best in the league at a 7.9. And you mentioned the Pacers. Indiana has 2 of the top 5-man lineups at a minimum of 400 possessions this season.
That does not surprise me. And Halliburton's in both of those. I already know because he has been the engine to really drive that Pacers team this year.
Halliburton, Nembhard, Siakam, and Miles Turner are in both of those. One is Aaron Nesmith, and the other is Benedict Mathurin.
Okay. That makes some sense there as well. But see, hearing that, a little bit of positivity about how Kuz might be able to help going forward, a little bit there. Again, there are still some things I think needs to be worked out with execution-wise when they're on the court. Yeah. But again, Kuz brings something defensively to this team, but teams have just started playing him a little bit differently recently. So I'm really curious to see how those numbers continue to pan out as the season goes on here.
It's like there is definitely more optimism when you go through those numbers. And, 10th best, I still expect better, but you can live with it. But the fact that 3 of the lineups that are better than you and 2 of them significantly better than you in front of you are 2 teams in your division. And that, I mean, who knows? I wouldn't bet on the Bucks Pacers as the 4-5 matchup, but 2 teams that may well be your first round matchup in the playoffs.
It could be. I mean, I've said it. I've wanted Pacers Bucks again first round this year just because let's add to the rivalry a little bit here. Let's add to it. Let's get that lick back, so on and so speak. But the Pistons have been playing really good ball. Before the season started, I said they're going to have the most wins that they've had since their playoff year. Now, again, that bar wasn't high because they only needed like 24 wins or something like that to have the most wins since they last made it to the playoffs in 18-19 when they went, I think, 41-41 that year. So it's been some tough sledding for the Pistons, but before the season started, I said, hey, I think that they have something that makes sense, and they have surpassed what I thought that they could do this season because Cade Cunningham's jump is really real here, and the pieces around him make a lot of sense. Our old friend Malik Beasley's over there putting up a bunch of threes and knocking them down at the clip that we know that he can.
They won 14 games last year, Camille. 14-68. They're going to triple their win total. They're already 38-31. So it's been remarkable. They have a better point differential than the Bucks do. They have a better offense in terms of efficiency than the Bucks do. Their defense is right in line with where the Bucks are at. And that includes our guy, Malik Beasley, who now all of a sudden the conversation has shifted to, man, it's probably going to cost us the mid-level to keep Malik Beasley, but we got to retain this guy at all costs.
Yeah, he's a valuable piece on a team. I just think last year the Bucks were using him a little bit out of place with him trying to check the opposing team's best offensive player. I love B's energy and his effort. Like, he didn't give up defensively, but that just wasn't the smart move to make, of trying to have him be taxed with defending the other team's best player with what his offensive responsibility was. But if you can just go out there like, hey, shoot that ball and then just play that team defense, and they can have Thompson pick up the tougher assignments, it makes a lot more sense for how that Pistons team is constructed with him on it. So they're going to be tough in the playoffs, and it's looking like I could see that first round matchup for the Bucks, assuming they don't fall to 6, which is within the realm of possibility here because of how close the Pistons, the Bucks, and the Pacers are in the standings. But if they can stay in that 4 or 5 matchup, you're looking at a date with either the Pistons or the Pacers, someone in your division. It's going to be a tough game because those are younger teams, fast-paced teams. So it'll be fun in the sense of like the basketball of it all. But for the Bucks, like, you can't take either one of those teams lightly.
So this season, and we mentioned to get back to AJ Green as we start to wind this one down here. It's it's one of those weird things where it's like your eyes are playing tricks on you, because I think if you asked most Bucks fans, hey, how, how would you think AJ Green's numbers are pre All-Star break and post All-Star break? I think most would say, well, I'm assuming he's shooting like in the low 30s,
Mhm.
a pretty significant drop off after the All-Star break than he was before the All-Star break. And it hasn't been the case. I mean, if we look at what AJ's done pre All-Star break versus post All-Star break, it's been fairly consistent in terms of his efficiencies. Little bit of a dip, and that came in the last 2 games especially, but not to the levels that you would expect. It is only 15 games versus 46, so we do have to keep that in mind. But he's shooting 39% on threes after the break here. He was shooting 42% before the All-Star break. So those 3 percentage points is noticeable, but I got to tell you, Camille, I would have assumed it was much, much lower than that.
Yeah, I think those misses stand out because he tends to have really, really good looks at it. And they're like,
Yeah.
man, this is wide open. I think AJ's going to knock this down. And when they don't fall, it feels like, man, it's not working for him today. And you mentioned it briefly on the Wednesday show, but I'm with you in the fact that I think AJ Green needs to put up more threes when he's on the court. That's one thing about Malik Beasley that I miss. And I know that there are some people who were like, hey, I think the Bucks take too many threes, and this NBA now, it's too many threes happening. But the Bucks tend to knock them down at one of the highest rates in the league. I believe they're top 3 in actual percentage
Yeah.
when it comes from 3-point, not the volume of shots that they get up, but they knock them down at a pretty high clip. And AJ Green is one of those guys who, listen, if he's shooting it, I'd prefer it to be a 3. We've seen him add a little bit to his game with some of the mid-range shooting and whatnot, which I think is helpful. But the Bucks need those guys to really get those threes up. And AJ Green's one of those guys where it's like, I wish he would do it more. But we've been seeing, you mentioned like the confidence. I've been saying like defensively for AJ, it's been a little bit too much body, not moving his feet as well as we've seen him do in the past, using his body too much, and refs are calling that, going for the pump fakes. Just the discipline's a little off. And for me watching AJ, as I wrap up here, I think about last season where he just kind of got cold down the stretch. It carried over
Yeah.
into the playoffs, and even at the start of this season, just a bit of a cold start to the season before he warmed up and started knocking him down at the clip that we've seen him do consistently so far throughout his young career. And I just hope that he's not hitting another like end of season wall right now. I would love to see how he can play through this because his skill set is really important and it can be very, very useful for this Bucks team come playoff time.
He shot 43% on open looks from 3 before the All-Star break. It's 40% after the All-Star break. The same basically difference in wide open looks as well. And I think to the point that we both kind of brought up, that's the big part that stands out is I think because of how this Bucks offense has really sputtered for large portions of the post All-Star break schedule, it stands out more when you get those open looks and don't knock them down. And I think that's a lot of what we've been seeing here from AJ Green during the course of the post All-Star break schedule, because he's actually hitting more contested threes after the break than or at a higher rate than he is on those open looks, and that was not the case before the All-Star break.
It's fascinating to hear that too. When I said I want him to shoot more threes, like AJ Green this year, this is the biggest role that he's had so far in his Bucks career on this team, averaging a little bit over 22 minutes a game. The first time in his career he's averaged over 15 minutes. Like he was an 11-minute a game season last year. So, you know, he's getting more minutes, and again, the wall aspect of it, just getting used to playing the minute role, getting used to the role, and now you're getting to the end of the season where a lot of basketball has been played. It's like, how do you push through here at the end? And even looking at his numbers, like his first 2 years, he averaged about 3-point attempts a game, up to 5 this season. So maybe continuously, gradually grows, but man, I love to see that around like 7 attempts a game for AJ Green from 3. Just get those mugs up, like really study the school of Malik Beasley when it comes to the aspect of being able to find that shot.
Oh, and you know, to a lesser extent too, Taurean Prince, because I think Frank has talked about it too, and a few of us talked about it with him. That's really what stands out about Malik Beasley, about Taurean Prince so far this season has been he's got a quick trigger and he's willing to get those shots off. So in the case of AJ, like, hey man, we need you to take threes and, to have games, even if the minutes are whatever it is, 10, let's say AJ Green plays 8 minutes. I still need more than 2 3-point attempts from AJ Green in that game. So you got to see the volume start to come up for AJ Green in those spots. Leave your thoughts in the comments over the lineup changes. What do the Bucks need to do? What's the big thing that's standing out for this group? And if you were Doc Rivers, what is the adjustment you would make to this Bucks lineup? Camille, so help me God, if the comments are just all about Brook Lopez. As this comes out, it is the first day of the NCAA tournament. I'm assuming I know, but who are you pulling for here, Camille?
We got the Marquette shirt on today. Got the alum shirt. It's all about Marquette basketball. The MUBB. We'll see how far they can go in the tournament this year, but that's my only rooting interest here. Let's go Marquette.
I had to send a text to Lisa Byington to give her some updates for one of the games she's going to be calling tomorrow. For she has the Arizona Akron game, so giving her the intel on my Arizona Wildcats. An annual tradition to get hyped up and watch, I don't know, a handful of games throughout the regular season. Although I saw more Arizona games this year than ever before because of the move to the Big 12 and playing in the Central Time Zone now. But the annual tradition of, the meme of putting on the clown paint and seeing this team lose early in the tournament, cannot wait for it.
I hope Marquette doesn't do that to me this year. Not after this season. I need Cam Jones to do his thing. I'm looking forward just to seeing how they can hoop this year.
Well, as I mentioned, leave your thoughts on what to do with this Bucks offense and their lineups, any changes that you would make. And we will be recapping the Bucks and the Los Angeles Lakers, hopefully an end of this losing streak for the Bucks and getting back in the win column. That'll do it for today's show. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.